Greetings, friends. A conflict has erupted between the so-called Russian Federation and Azerbaijan, and the Azerbaijanis have seen the true face of the Russians.
Whether during the era of Tsarist Russia or in the Soviet Union, the Russian people were considered the superior race. Azerbaijanis, Uzbeks, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, Turkmen, and representatives of other nationalities were always regarded as second-class peoples.
The cause of the conflict was that Russian police literally carried out an anti-Azerbaijani pogrom, torturing and killing Azerbaijanis on the territory of the so-called Russia.
My eye doesn't see very well, and I'm feeling quite dizzy. They broke my nose. My nose, so to speak, was bleeding. I was lying on the floor. They told me to wipe the floor so the blood wouldn't be visible, so that if I complained, I wouldn't be able to prove that I was beaten.
I have to emphasize, the pogrom wasn't carried out by just ordinary Russians, but by representatives of the Russian authorities. Even the Russian diaspora in Azerbaijan was shocked by how things unfolded.
Today, looking at the events in Yekaterinburg, it's simply impossible not to feel pain and anxiety. Relations are suffering between states bound by alliance, history and trust.
But the Russian propagandists themselves responded that in fact they were just carrying out a special operation. And in general, things need to be tightened up even more.
So, special operations took place in Yekaterinburg.
Dear Motherland has started gradually tightening the screws.
Russians are never satisfied with the number of enemies they have. They keep looking for more and more, and with their own hands they are bringing closer the collapse of the so-called Russia, which we will definitely witness and broadcast live.
We need to break up Russia.
And in order for these wonderful times to come as soon as possible, we already need your donation for the ongoing Gruzerize and also for the Shahederize. We also supply drones to intercept Shaheds.
Thank you to the Sternenko community for providing FPV Sting drones to protect our skies from Shaheds.
Don't forget to donate the cost of your morning coffee to the Defense Forces of Ukraine. Right now, we have a great need for help.
All the payment details are, as always, in the description of this video, and still only half of those who watch my videos are subscribed to the channel. Don't do that. Be sure to subscribe. The story of the new conflict between Azerbaijan and the so-called Russia began when, the day before, Russian police in Yekaterinburg carried out a pogrom. They broke into the homes of Azerbaijanis, started beating and torturing them. Several of them were abducted and then tortured with electric shocks at the police station.
We were beaten badly at home. The house was turned upside down. Everything we had was thrown onto the floor. We were beaten at home for an hour. They started using stun guns, shocking us with electricity. I saw that he was also dragged into the office and they were running electricity through him. He was being electrocuted, not with a stun gun, but with direct current.
As a result of these tortures, several Azerbaijanis died, but the Russians officially stated that, in fact, no force was used against them at all. They supposedly just died from fear and stress. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan responded immediately. They summoned the acting chargé d'affaires of the Russian Federation's embassy in Azerbaijan to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There is no ambassador there because the Russians shot down a plane and never apologized. And that's when Kremlin propaganda kicked in. One of Solovyov's propagandists, Mardan, is outraged that Azerbaijan is concerned about Azerbaijanis.
What business is it of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan to care about Russian citizens, no matter what their origin is?
And this was said by a creature from a failed state that starts new wars just because it thinks that somewhere someone is oppressing Russians, not even Russians, but Russian speakers.
What the hell made them decide to meddle in our internal affairs anyway? Apparently, they have compatriots here. Compatriots? Take them with you.
Azerbaijan did not receive any adequate official response from the so-called Russian Federation, only excuses and threats. And so it began to respond further. Azerbaijan's parliamentary delegation cancelled its visit to the so-called Russian Federation. The visit of Russian Deputy Prime Minister Virchuk to Azerbaijan was also cancelled. And then the Ministry of Culture of Azerbaijan did what Ukraine had not dared to do until the very beginning of the full-scale invasion, even though the Russo-Ukrainian war was already ongoing. In Azerbaijan, they cancelled the performances of absolutely all Russians who were trying to make money there, including Basta, who had come to Kiev not so long ago, right before the full-scale invasion. Because you can't be polite with Russians. These creatures do not understand normal human language. And even after everything that has happened, they continue to threaten Azerbaijanis.
It's too late, not harsh enough, and this issue is not being emphasized politically enough. The Russian police should pressure them so hard that blood comes out of their eyes.
At the same time, I must remind you that the Azerbaijani diaspora in the so-called Russian Federation numbers about 3 million people. For some reason, Russians tend to forget this. But Azerbaijanis will not forget what the Russians are doing. They are already being called fascists and chauvinists. And Vladimir Putin has been called the main chauvinist. On Azerbaijani national television, the behavior of Russians was criticized and their true nature was explained. They are imperialists who understand nothing but the language of force.
Recognition of principle. Does that bother you so much? We understand, after all, you're used to dominating the peoples forcibly incorporated into Russia. But does the official Kremlin, and specifically the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, understand that this is no longer 1937 but 2025, and the states that were once part of the Union have been independent for more than 30 years now?
Of course, the Kremlin doesn't understand this. For them, Azerbaijan doesn't exist as a separate state at all. To them, it's all just one big Soviet Union. I have a theory as to why the Russians behave this way in general. Why did they organize a pogrom against Azerbaijanis? Apparently, this is their way of taking revenge for being asked to apologize for shooting down the Azerbaijani plane.
That's why it was necessary to admit their guilt, to apologize to Azerbaijan in a timely manner, a country considered friendly, and to communicate this to the public. All these measures and steps were necessary. Unfortunately, during the first 3 days, we heard nothing from Russia except for absurd statements.
In Russian imperial logic, if a victim defends themselves and even starts to make demands, that victim must be attacked again. That's what Russians always do. And let me remind you that after Aliyev demanded an apology for the downed plane, Russian propagandists publicly called for repressions and pogroms against Azerbaijanis. Russians torture, kill, and then blame their victims for what was done to them. This time is no different. Russian television has already declared all Azerbaijanis to be criminals.
Crime has no nationality or religion. Turns out it does. Well, we've always known that it does.
But it's a completely different story when it comes to the Kadyrovites. Russians are willing to tolerate and even respect the Kadyrovites, even when, for example, in the Belgorod People's Republic, they attack the cops.
Please, do not touch them, do not make any contact with them at all.
After this incident, the Russians kept their mouths shut and only a few expressed outrage, but another Kadyrovite responded to them and called them roosters.
Honestly, I'm amazed by this pompous rooster-like behavior of yours. You really are roosters. Honestly, I can't call it anything else. I am the commander of the Ahmad Special Forces, second.
And this is the moment we should pause at. Pay attention to the watch that the Kadyrov general is wearing. It turns out that this one costs only $155,000. And the Russians chipped in to buy Abdi Alodinov this watch, and now he just mocks them.
Thank you so much for noticing my watch like that, the beautiful one I wore today to the wonderful wedding. Thanks for that. Honestly, I'm not particularly embarrassed, no matter what you might say.
By the way, about the wedding that Abdi Alodinov attended, this was the wedding of Ramzan Kadyrov's son Adam. And at this wedding, he showed off a diamond-studded watch worth only $7 million. Pretty cheap, really.
Where do they get so much money from?
Seriously, where do the Kadyrovites get their money? Definitely not from Vladimir Putin, who pays them tribute. But when that money runs out, that's when things will get really interesting in so-called Russia.
We need to break up Russia.
There are actually some updates regarding Russian money. United States Senator Lindsey Graham says that Trump has approved this bill on sanctions against so-called Russia.
I play golf with him. He said, it's time to move forward, to push your bill.
The American president probably doesn't like very much that Vladimir Putin is deceiving him. And already in July, the Senate is supposed to approve that very same bill on secondary sanctions.
If you buy products from Russia and do not help Ukraine, then a 500% tariff is imposed on your goods imported into the United States. India and China buy 70% of Putin's oil.
However, there is just one nuance here. Even when the Senate votes for this bill, it does not mean that the sanctions will automatically be imposed, because for them to take effect, a decision from Trump will still be required. Meanwhile, the Russian devils continue to attack Ukraine, advancing on most sections of the front and complaining that it is difficult for them.
We're advancing everywhere, practically everywhere, but everywhere without any clearly defined quantitative or territorial gains.
However, the Russian invaders are still making advances, particularly in the east of our country, and the military needs your help. More than 100 units are still waiting for new supplies. Be sure to join in. And in the meantime, over the past 2 days, thanks to you, our soldiers have received another 385 new FPV drones.
We, the fighters of the Heavenly Retribution Unmanned Systems Battalion of the 54th Brigade, want to thank the Stonenko community for providing the Russories drones. Evil must be punished. Glory to Ukraine!
Glory to the heroes!
Wishing you good health. The 65th Separate Mechanized Brigade, Unmanned Systems Platoon, would like to express our gratitude to the Stonenko community, as well as to Serhiy Stonenko and everyone who helps raise funds for drones, for providing us with FPVs, together to victory. Glory to Ukraine!
The strongest, unbreakable, Cossack, indomitable, the 103rd Separate Territorial Defense Brigade, named after Metropolitan Andrei Sheptytsky, thanks the Sternenko community for providing Sting FPV drones to help protect our skies from Shaheds. Thank you to the Sternenko community and all subscribers. Join the Sternenko community. Glory to Ukraine.
Wishing you good health, dear friends. We want to express our gratitude to the Sternenko community and personally to Serhiy Sternenko for providing 50 Rusorizy Russian cutters, which will already be sent tomorrow to destroy the enemy. People, don't forget to donate the cost of your morning coffee to the Defense Forces of Ukraine. At the moment, we have a great need for assistance.
The anti-aircraft battery of the 109th Brigade would like to thank the Sternenko community and Serhiy himself for providing 30 Rusorizy Russian cutters, and we also want to express our deep gratitude to the guys from the Red Drones project for modifying these drones to suit our needs and tasks. Together to victory! Glory to Ukraine!
Dear community, dear Mr. Serhiy Sternenko, we are very grateful to you for providing this time 50 very special drones, with the help of which we will prepare a very pleasant surprise for us and accordingly a not so pleasant one for the Russians. Together to victory.
We, the warriors of the 28th Brigade RV-28 unit, sincerely thank Serhiy Sternenko and his community for providing a set of 10 fiber optic drones which will help us destroy the Russians. Thank you for your support. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes.
The FPV unit of the Motorized Infantry Battalion of the 30th Brigade thanks the Stonenko community for providing 100 drones. Glory to Ukraine!
Glory to the heroes. Friends, Russians only understand strength, so give our army even more power. Keep supporting the security and defense forces of Ukraine.